Welcome you, Bobby. I'm very happy and very excited to have you in my podcast and talking about the leadership, especially in the humble leadership, because I like your style. I like working with you. And I think this is very inspirational part to tap into your story, into your mindset, how you do the things. So Bobby, I'm very thrilled to welcome you in my podcast.
I'm truly honored that you feel that way. I mean, I think it's one of those things that it's hard for me as how my personality is to accept the praise, right? I mean, I think that's unfortunately in a way an American mindset. At least that's how it was always you can always do better, right? And so whenever you kind of get that praise, it's fantastic and I appreciate it. But it's like, okay, well, what can I do better? How can I one up myself, right? So I do appreciate it and I do feel honored. So thank you.
Before we start, let me quickly introduce Bobby. So Bobby is how should I say it? Is a colleague, which I like working with. He's director in Boston, one of our business unit for ERT, and I'm very happy and excited to tap into a deep discussion with you, Bobby. We used to work together running various projects in finance department because you are the financial director for one of the business units for ERT, a research technology. You are based in Boston. And whenever I was coming to you, your common phrase is, how can I help you? And how I can learn the new things. And you are very open. So from where that mindset, that approach came from? Is it something which you learn, or is it something which came from your childhood? So can you say a little bit more?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I was always, as a child, always a curious person, right? I always like to read. I always like to learn as much as I can about anything. On the same note, while my house might not have looked as tidy as it was, I like to have order in things. And I think a lot of it comes from a team sport background where, you have practice, this is whenever things start, you have an agenda and everything. And so I think between those two things, it's only in a way progressed as I've grown in my career as an individual and in my career, to the point of that thirst for knowledge, I guess you would say, which I think is a attribute that I think everyone can kind of get on board with, is always, you never stop learning, right? I mean, you should never stop learning. That's how the advice I was always given, whether it was some of my colleagues here or as my teachers. Always never stop learning, because that knowledge, while you might not be able to use it today, doesn't mean you can't use it tomorrow, right? You never know what meetings or what audiences that you'll have. So just having that tidbit of information, whether it's about, as you said before, an operating business unit, right? How they work or how they differ from your business unit, right? Because our business units definitely are different, but I think some of those differences have helped us create a bond, a working relationship, right? That kind of helps us understand each other and look at things differently. We challenge each other, right, on how we look at the same pieces of data. But going back to staying on topic, I want to say that there's many ways where it's, I want others to, I live by the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated yourself. So whenever that is, I want to be courteous to people. I want to understand and work to help them, right? Because that's what, if someone's coming to me, they probably need something. I know you have the small talk and everything else, but at the end of the day, if someone is chatting someone in finance, it's because they have a problem, right? And it's one of those things that just being courteous and how can I help, or what can I do for you, is, I think, the proper way. That's how I would want someone to respond to me if I were to ask or be in the same situation.
I agree, Bobby. This is something which we would like to be treated. However, it's not a common approach in the corporate because we want to do the things quick, but that approach is not very common, I would say. But when that started, did you have any experience in the past or mentors who might help you think and shape in that way?
I would say yes. I do believe. So when I came into our ERT, right, our company, I had a lot. It was a very small company at the time, and it was that entrepreneurial mindset. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it was that small business type mentality where everyone was kind of treated as family, right? Where it was, all right, we have to get things done. We know that we have to get things done, but how do we get there? We have to work together, right? It doesn't matter that person A is in finance and person B is in logistics. It doesn't matter that you are in project management or anything else. We have one common goal. We want to succeed. And I think that's where it really started to cement that mindset, that it worked well, right? Everyone was happy. You kind of felt like you were part of something more, right? And I think creating that environment truly helped create that mindset that we should always continue to learn. We should always be willing to help one another. We should put in the extra effort, because while it might create more work for you today, you don't know where that person that you're helping is going to be in a couple of weeks from now, or a couple of months, or even years from now, where they might be able to help you in the same way that you're helping them.
Absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely so true. And like you mentioned, entrepreneurial way and let's say family business, small business, it's all about all hands on board, yeah? So everybody helping each other. And sometimes I used to call this stafette, when one is giving the stick to another and running, and at the end, everybody are finishing the run on time. But this is something very unique. That's why it's driving me to the next question. Entrepreneurial mindset, this is something which you think we can learn? Or is it something which we are born with that? What would be your approach, and how that mindset is helping or might help, especially in the corporate environment, thinking in that direction? Because we need to also mention to our audience, we are coming with the financial background. So we're working as a finance advisor and supporting the business from the finance point of view. But how that way of thinking is helping you as a leader, and is helping or might help people in your team to grow up, to leadership position.
Yeah, I think to start with your question on whether or not it's something that you are in a way born with, or what you have, or what you can learn, I think it's a little bit of both. I think everyone has some portion of this entrepreneurial mindset in them, but there's different level of risks. So me personally, I am not a huge risk taker. I will take them based off of what the risk reward type view is, but I'm not one to jump all feet in to say, hey, I'm going to start this business, right? Where others might be, that's the way that they are. However, you can learn some of the characteristics, and you can adapt and change in a way, your daily behaviors by, just making one small change a day, right? Where you know that mistakes are okay, right? Creating that environment to say, you know what, it's okay to make a mistake, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you have that, you make mistakes, but what the item is you really don't make the same mistake twice, right? It's learning from those mistakes, adapting your processes so that you know that you make the mistake, you feel safe that you can make the mistake, but you learn from it so that you don't continue to fall into that same trap, right? I think that as you progress in your career, the people that you see continuing to progress are those that have that drive, right? That are willing to be flexible, that will help others, right? They create that positive environment around them where you don't have to be an optimist, right? You don't have to always see everything as the glass half full rather than the glass half empty, but you have to create that feeling that people want to work with you, right? That you are someone that they can trust and that you can trust them. I think whenever you come to it, a lot of those things are characteristics that we can hone over time, right? And really just keeping things as basic as possible, right? Being honest with people, being open with them, allowing yourself the risk, right, of trusting others, right? I think that's probably one of the hardest things to kind of get used to or comfortable with, is especially whenever you move up from a individual contributor into a management type role, is trusting people, right? Because you can't do all the work yourself, right? As you progress, as you continue to take on additional stuff, and you build your trust, or you build your, in a way, your portfolio, quote unquote portfolio, you take on more work because people trust that you can get it done, which is fantastic. But at some point, you also have to pass off some of that work. So you have to take that trust that's given to you and reciprocate it to others, right? To trust them that they can do what you need them to. And I think that helps to create an environment that people want to work with you, that they have that, in a way, that entrepreneur, that small business mindset that we were talking about. And I think you can apply those same things to corporate. We can't make wide scale changes, right? We can't Absolutely. Say, oh, you know what? We can pivot at the drop of a hat and say, you know what, this isn't working. We're just going to go complete 360, because in the corporate function, you still might have to do reporting that's necessary. You still might have to answer to board, your normal monthly activities. But you can change the little stuff, right? You can change the way that you approach something. Just because one task is done this way, or you learned it this way whenever you took it over, doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. And I think creating an environment, that's what I try to do with my team, is say, hey, just because I did it this way, right, doesn't mean you need to. I'm going to give you the freedom to kind of work through what's the best way for you to complete it. And as long as we get the work done on time, I don't care how we get there. There's multiple paths to the same destination, right? I mean, you can drive somewhere versus walking over a hill, right? The drive might be smoother, right, because you're driving on a road, but the hill could work just as fine. And you might get there sooner than driving because of traffic and other things like that. So there's plenty of different ways to get to the same answer. It's just a matter of what's best for you, and being willing to take a risk, right? Because the hardest part is during a closed cycle, or during what our normal day-to-day is saying, you know what, do I have an extra hour to be able to try this some other way, right? Or do I have an extra couple hours to try it? And knowing that if you fail, you have to go back and do the work anyway. So it's having that commitment to try something new, and the drive to at least make sure that you still deliver it on time, so that you know, all right, well, this time it didn't work out, but maybe I can make these few tweaks to the process to say, next time, right, this will actually be faster. And so it's again, learning from those mistakes, applying that same mindset, so that in a way you're not wasting time, right? Whenever you make the same mistake over and over again, I think you waste time. That's something that, as you also progress in your career, you realize you have less of. So I think that's part of that entrepreneur mindset as well, of knowing when to call it quits on something, so that you don't continue to waste your time, and pivoting so that you know, how do we maybe you can use part of what you created, right, to adjust and save time later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree with you, Bobby, because this is what is differentiating, the open-minded and the entrepreneurial mindset people. And literally, you are walking your talk, because I remember when you have to take some time off, when you have your celebration for the little one, your team basically were operating on a good manner. When we have to provide some tasks, some calculations, you trust your people. So they were fully operational. And like you said, trust them and coach them in the way that whenever you are not there, people, they know how to operate, and they are not scared to do the movements on their risk, taking the ownership for that. And I think this is what leadership is about, to show that works, so the others could replicate them. That's why, even though saying more, it's also giving the people the safe space, even if we are in the meeting, isn't it? So they are leaving the meeting with kind of approach.
Absolutely. And I think what we also find, and I know this isn't necessarily an entrepreneurial mindset, but kind of, I think something that you said triggered, like, I know many times that we've been in meetings where I know that you've definitely gained more confidence over your time here at ERT, where as things have progressed, or as we've gone back and forth and thrown ideas off each other, I feel like you're more comfortable to speak up. And I think it's infectious whenever you try to lead by example in a way, right? So luckily I've been blessed long enough to have tenure here at the company, and to be able to feel comfortable that I'm okay to speak my mind. But I think it goes back to, as we had said before, you had mentors that created that environment that it was okay. And even though you might change managers throughout your career, you might change positions or be in a completely different department, you can still work to create that change from below, right? You can work to voice your opinion. You can work to be willing to work together and lead by example, by showing like, hey, we might not interact every day to day, but whenever the need arises, we can work together, right? And by showing others that we work together and giving the correct praise to people, right? Not taking credit for the work that they did or the hard work that they did, but speaking up for that person, like, hey, so-and-so, or Cornelia did this, Cornelia is great, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's all good praises that I know personally that I'm able to give. But just making sure that people understand the value that they deliver helps build that confidence, right? And creating that safe space, right, that creates trust. And I think that's an important thing. And it doesn't need to be someone from the CEO or CFO to start that view. We can build that from whatever position that you might be in, right? You could be starting out, and as long as you're starting to try and create that team environment, I think it becomes infectious, right? And people are willing to then open themselves up to say, you know what, maybe I am willing to learn about that other business, or maybe I am willing to learn about accounting, even though that's not my expertise, right? And that thirst for knowledge, right? Going back to that knowledge, you might not use it that day, but who knows what happens in another week or 2 weeks when you get pulled into another meeting, and who in that meeting might misspeak, and you could say, obviously respectfully, but just say, no, I don't think that's the way that revenue is recognized for this line of business. I actually think that based off discussions with so-and-so, that there's a difference between these. And so we have to keep that in mind, right? Just some of those respectful interactions, but it helps expand that knowledge and also show that value of, hey, I pay attention, right? So it creates that in a way that in a center of excellence kind of thing, but it's people would normally say a subject matter expert of sorts, right? You're going to end up going to be the go-to person to start answering questions, and you might not be able to answer them all, but that doesn't mean you can't point someone in the right direction, right? And going back to the golden rule, right? Treat others. I might not be able to give you the answer, but I can find someone who might be able to help you. And if you create those working relationships, people will respond appropriately.
Absolutely. And Bobby, people, they used to have a tendency having expectations, because we as a human, we used to have expectations. But like you mentioned, sometimes we need to, and more often, we have to take the charge how we can contribute, what we have in our power to change the environment on the relationship with the people, especially in the corporate or outside of the corporate, which we are dealing with. And like you mentioned, those are these little examples which might change the needle and change the whole behavior, treating people in a respectful manner, searching for the answer, trying to help, and which overall is creating this space and the atmosphere for the team cooperation, isn't it? And you as a leader, of course, leader is also having some obligations, but also team members, they can also put some efforts in that way to contribute, which gives them the great path to the career growth, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think you have it spot on. As leaders, we do, I feel like, have an obligation, right, to lead by example, and in a way show your reports or your colleagues how you think things need to go. That might not always jive with someone else's personality. That might not always be the right way, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's one of those things that again, going back to some of the other items we've discussed, that thirst for knowledge, right? And being willing to pivot and adapt and learn, you kind of take some of those small pieces and say, you know what, maybe I didn't approach that right. Or you take the feedback from people, whether it's good or bad. The hardest thing to do is actually listen to bad feedback, but it's also the most helpful, right? Because it's something that someone has perceived that you might have one thought of how your message was discussed or how you delivered the message, but that's not how someone might have heard it. And so understanding how to break away from some of those communication barriers, or even taking some of that feedback, it's not always easy. It's also, it's probably one of the most stressful things for me is getting feedback whenever I think that it's going to be bad. But at the end of it, it's all something to make myself better, right? Not only for whatever company that I work for, but me as a person, right? And I think that's one of those things where going back to entrepreneurial mindset, we have to take that risk to be willing to listen to that feedback. It's hard. Mm-hmm. It really is. But it's something that I think is really beneficial. And I know that in the past, I've asked you, like, what can I do better, right? And you've definitely provided feedback. And I hope that I've been able to work through that. But it's being willing to ask that question and know that you trust people and what their value is, right? I think that also creates a bond with people to strengthen that working relationship, whether it's a team environment, right? Whether it's someone that you work with across the desk, or whether it's someone that might be that you don't really know well, right? Or that might not even be in your department. It doesn't matter who's giving you the feedback, as long as you trust them to give you honest feedback. I think it's beneficial if you work to incorporate that into your day-to-day.
Bobby, you touched a very interesting subject in terms of feedback, which is leading me to the next question related to the communication, because we as a human, we cannot communicate, we have to communicate. And what is your opinion in terms of transparent communication? Do you have a definition of the transparent communication? Because like I said, I like doing the project with you, whenever we are having a struggle, or working how to tackle the data, how to go about it. You always transparently saying that. And also, can we also tackle that aspect from the management point of view, how transparency play a role in the leadership communication? What would be your response to that?
So I think I have multiple answers to it, and that's not okay, probably
so let's tackle this more.
Taking it one step at a time, just one small step. So my view on communication is being honest with people, right? There's nothing more difficult than trying to upkeep lies, right? That's whenever you start creating the webs and trying to upkeep the webs, and nothing breaks trust more than lying to someone, right? And that doesn't mean you can always give them all the information, right? Especially when it comes to, and this is getting into the management item, right? Into things that might be in a way top secret, right? Or if like there's a merger or acquisition, exactly, right? Or if there's some type of information that can be used for financial gains or anything like that. Like there's a point in time when you can't necessarily divulge that information, but in my day-to-day, I try to be as open and transparent as possible, because that's how I want people to come to me. I don't want to get on a meeting with someone and come up with a list of things or talk through something just to find out later that they only told me that because they thought that would make me happy. Like, sure, not all news is going to be good news and not all items are going to be great, but I'd rather know up front and be able to work through something than it is to try and say, you know what, let me spin this some way that makes it look more beneficial. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, I think those are the webs that we weave, and it's very easy to fall off of that. And I don't want to break that trust with anyone, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
I think you have to be careful with your messaging. Just because I am open and transparent, or just because you're being transparent and honest with someone, doesn't mean you need to be abrasive, right? You need to understand how to deliver that message, right? Especially whenever it comes to things like feedback, right? You don't want to come off as someone that you don't want to work with, or that I think we've all had experiences where we're like, okay, well, that person really didn't care what others felt, right? I think you still have to have that empathy in the way that, in a way, or arrogant would be one way, right? Because that's one way you can deliver a message, or in a way rude, right? You can be very blunt about your message and not care about what the other person feels on the other side. And that's not how I want to be, right? Because that's not how I want to be treated. So there's a tendency for me, at least, to really take some time, especially whenever it's those difficult conversations, to see what is the best way to word it so that it's where you look at it from a positive view. Even if it's hard, difficult feedback that you have to give, you still want to kind of deliver it with as much, I won't say positivity, because you don't want to make it sunshine, right? If someone's not keeping their end of the bargain, but try and keep that spin on it to understand, well, how do we ensure that we move forward from this? I've delivered my message as honest and transparent as I can. How do we move forward so that we can continue to work together or build that trust back up, or whatever the conversation is? But I think being honest is the easiest way to keep a working relationship going, and to be trustworthy yourself, right? That you're someone that people can rely on, because you're going to give them not the answer that they want to hear, you're going to give them the truth, right? That is sometimes difficult to hear.
Absolutely. And you know, Bobby, this is what is very much appreciated, especially for the leaders and for the people who are having such a behavior. They are very they are growing up in their career as well. So what about the business trusted advisor? So you already mentioned about the information, you are saying the truth. So how would you like to give your thought about how to be a business trusted advisor, in many aspects, not only from the finance point of view, because we are working to be a business trusted advisor, but for other people who are towards career and they want to be perceived as a trusted advisor in very various departments or expertise which they have.
Yeah, and I think that can vary. I mean, I could talk about finance all day long, right? And I'm sure you're well aware that I can. My thought on it is, if you try your hardest, you work to meet your deadlines, you deliver quality work, and you create that working relationship with whoever you're working with on the other side, I think that lays the foundation to be that trusted business partner, right? You will start to, the more that you interact with someone, you'll start to learn their tendencies, right? And what they look at, how they look at the data, how they think through things. Then what you can kind of do is work to think month over month, that continue learning, that proactive mindset of saying, you know what, so-and-so asked me these 3 questions based off of what I provided them this time. How can I not only answer that question for them next time, right, so that they don't ask it again, but what are some of the other things that based off those questions could I answer for them, right? Are they looking at the data the way that they need to? And Kate's going back to what we do, but is what they're looking at the right way to look at it? Or is there another way for them to take a step back and say, you know what, maybe this isn't the right way to think through the data. What if we look at it this way, right? Or even asking opinions from others. And again, going back to, we have to be careful with what we share all the time.
Yes.
We might not be able to share the confidential information, but getting feedback from others. There's been times whenever I've come to you, right? Where I'm like, okay, well, I have this problem. This is what it's telling me. What are your thoughts? Like, what's another way that I can approach it? Because I know that while we work well together, you might approach something completely different than I do, right? It's much like learning. I know that I learn well from being in person, being in attendance, whereas if I were left to reading, especially back in my college and high school days, and left to online courses, that wasn't the best way for me to learn, right? So I know my strengths and weaknesses from that perspective, and they might not be the same strengths and weaknesses that you have or a colleague has. And so valuing that feedback from others and asking them their opinion, I think creates a trust with them, but it also allows you to be a better business partner for someone else, right? To give that advice or give that guidance to them. And that doesn't mean that they're going to take that guidance, but it allows you to create that environment where that business partner might say, you know what, that's a different way of looking at it. And while it might not be what I want to look at right now, there might be another thing down the road that they look at it a different way, which could result in, from a finance perspective, in a good decision for the company, right? Maybe you're able to have cost savings without truly mitigating headcount, right? Something like that in terms of some of the things that to put it in perspective. But I think it's one, creating that trust. Two, it's creating by delivering quality work and being willing to work with that person. I think that creates the trust that really forms a good business partner relationship.
Yeah. And you know, Bobby, if I'm just picking up all the elements which you just talk about it's giving me the definition and the elements and the recipe for a humble leadership. You know, we will come back to that definition, but just to summarize for our audience. So basically, be vulnerable in that sense that giving people the space for the feedback, accepting that feedback, allowing ourselves to learn and go about it. You can gain much more because you might get already the answers for your questions or for the solution which you have, which on the opposite side might give you the pluses and gains as a business partner, advisor, or advisor in a business. So, Bobby, I think it's working absolutely very well in that sense. It's already kind of recipe for a humble leadership. So what would be your then definition? What defines the humble leadership?
That's a very, very good question, because I think whenever it comes to humble leadership, it's a very fine line. And I'm going to speak to sports analogies, and sorry for those who might not be sports enthusiasts, but it's one of those things that whenever playing American football, right, you kind of have to walk with a chip on your shoulder, as the saying goes, or you have to be confident in what you do. But that doesn't mean that you need to be arrogant about it, right? And so I know that a lot of teammates were always really talkative, right? And they always wanted to say how good they were, or always try and, in a way, get in the mind of others. There's two ways to approach it. You can be that talkative person, or you can really be that quiet person that knows, I know what I can do. I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. I know where I can improve. But that doesn't mean I need to tell you, right? It doesn't mean that I need to really tell everyone in the world, like, here's how good I am. I think it's one of those things of being, as you said, being humble, right? Knowing, sure, I am valued. I know that I do give a lot to the company. I do provide a lot of value, but that doesn't mean I need to tell everyone, hey, this is all the value that I provide. I let, in a way, the work that I do kind of speak for itself, but not allowing it to go unnoticed in a way, right? Because I think that's part of the issues that I especially had it early in my career was I would do all the work, but sometimes others would take advantage of doing that work and make it their own. And while you know you did the work, sometimes it's hard to adapt to that or know that others are willing to take advantage of someone else like that. Mm-hmm. I used it as a learning opportunity, right? To kind of say, you know what, I made a mistake or I let it go. Next time next time I won't be as nice, right? You broke that trust with me where we were working together on this project. I'm not going to allow you to take ownership for something that you didn't necessarily do. And so I know that experience where my work was taken advantage of a few times helped me become a better person because I understand what it felt like to be in that situation, right? I don't want others to feel that way. So even though I might be the person presenting the data, it doesn't mean that I put it together. And so I'll make sure to give the others credit whenever possible. And I think that really helps to drive that accountability, but also drive that team environment to say, you know what, it's not all about me, right? The higher you get up in management, I feel the more that you, in a way, delegate to others, but the more that you depend on others to give you the data, right? Or to give you the information to make informed decisions or give you the information to be that trusted business partner. But that doesn't mean I need to take credit for it, right? There's plenty of times whenever I have to rely on others to help me complete something, and I need to make sure that they get the credit for the work that they do.
Bobby, I'm so happy that you are mentioning that because it's completely destroying the stereotypes which some leaders might think, showing that there is a team behind all this delivery. And another element which I clearly see in our meetings, you always highlighting the ones who are behind the job, who are delivering and giving the recognition. So this is really great. And another element which I would add, fully agree what you are saying, is be willing to learn. This learning, constant learning path, even through expression, how can I help you, which is also representing mindset of learning. But at the same time, like you mentioned, if I do the mistake, I will learn not to repeat it once again, which give me the strength once again as a leader going forward, on a different position. So this is really awesome. This is how I would also see the leadership. And of course, respecting others in a very simple manner, this is also what we might add into the humble leadership. Bobby, then the next question, actually, we're going to the end of our interview. What would be your advice for the leaders who are leading in the challenging time? The challenging time now we have like a social distance pandemic. What will be your response? I know it's not something which you can do over the night. You can build the foundations, but what would be those layers, those foundations, which you can give us the advice from your perspective?
I feel whenever you come to that, I think you have to work to know yourself. I think that's the very first point whenever I try and tell people anything is understand yourself, right? And it's some of those things, and you can go back to interviews, like you hear those what's the word, the normal questions that you would expect, like what's your strengths, what your weaknesses. A lot of times people aren't asking to know what really is your strength, right? Because they can see it through your work and how you present yourself. It's more of understanding, like, do you really know yourself as a person? Are you comfortable, or have you thought about how comfortable you are with yourself, right? And I think you have to create that, you have to be comfortable with yourself, or try to be, right? And there's always going to be things that make us uncomfortable, but you have to be comfortable and create that that environment for others, I think, right? You have to be willing to listen, right? While it seems easy, that's probably the hardest thing for me, is to make sure that I'm listening well and I am understanding the messages that should be perceived. And so I know that is one thing that I've worked on over my career, especially more as I've taken on the more leadership roles, because a lot of times you might hear one thing, but that might not be how the message might be perceived. And so I think making sure that you listen, asking questions, being willing to ask questions. No question is a stupid question in the grand scheme of it. It allows you to understand and refine what you need to do, right? If someone tells you, hey, do this, okay, that's fine, but what are you really looking for? What's the purpose behind it, so that I can make sure that I'm going to look at it the way that it needs to be done, right? One of the early on, and I had a note here, but one of the early on items from beginning of my career, right, as I was mentored and worked through it, it's not always about giving someone the answer to their question right away, right? It's not about how fast we can give someone the answer. It's about how quickly can you get the answer that provides the most value, right, to answer the question. So sure, you can give someone, in our case, you can give someone a revenue number, but that doesn't mean that you're answering the question that they need. Maybe there's something behind it that's driving that question. And it might not necessarily be about revenue, or it might not be about the whole bucket of revenue. It might just be a small sliver. So rather than going back and forth on an email chain 4 or 5 times and providing 5 different answers, if you would have asked 1 or 2 questions, you might have been able to save the extra 45 minutes or hour, however long you might have been working on it, to refine what that person is truly looking for. And so I think listening, right, being comfortable with yourself, but again, going back to respecting others, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. I think if you are able to do that while delivering quality work, I think you'll always go far, right? I mean, I think those are some of the key foundations that you can build to move forward, not only in your career, but to better yourself as an individual, I think.
Yeah, also, I really like it. I mean, I signing this off. That's why we are having this talk, to sharing our experience and tapping into your experience and talking about the leadership. Bobby, it was a very big pleasure. So guys, if you like such a talk, if you like the humble leadership, I'm very happy to have you here, Bobby, in my podcast, and talking about the humble leadership and the tips and tricks how to create a better space for our daily life, interacting with people and doing the business on a day-to-day way and having fun at the same time.
Yeah, Cornelia, I truly appreciate it. I, again, am very honored for you to have picked me as one of the guests on your podcast, and I truly value you as a person, and I'm excited to hopefully we can talk some more. But we'll see how everything goes, and I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Bobby. And of course, guys, if you like, please subscribe, put the comments, and we can come with more episodes with Bobby. If you have any specific questions, put your comments in the section below, and we will respond to that. So thank you very much, and thank you, Bobby. It was a big pleasure to talk to you.
It was. Take care. Bye, everyone.